Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and today we're diving into the Steam Winter Sale to find some great deals that are actually worth taking advantage of. As always, my focus is on strategic and tactical games, from real-time strategy to GSGs to city builders and much more besides. And if you have recommendations of your own to share, you should absolutely do so in the comments below. With all that said, with timestamps down below, and with wallets at the ready, let's begin. Songs of Conquest is currently 66% off, available for just about $11, and if you're looking for something to fill that Heroes of Might and Magic shaped hole in your heart while you wait for the next Heroes of Might and Magic to release, look no further than this absolute gem. Many have tried to hit that perfect balance of RPG, turn-based strategic map, base building, and turn-based grid-based tactical combat, but few, if any, have managed. Songs of Conquest, meanwhile, has absolutely hit the nail on the head across every measure. While you can play skirmishes and multiplayer on developer-provided and user-made maps as well, the narrative campaigns across the multiple factions are all just so fun and engaging, with some great writing and fantastic ideas to go with them. Whether you're playing as the undead barony of Loth, the merchant gunslinging Baria, the knightly Arleon, or the oppressed frog folk of the Rana, there are unique heroes, unique buildings, and unique units all working together across the turn-based campaign map and the turn-based tactical battles alike, with the latter presenting grid-based battlefields featuring height advantages, obstacles, and much more besides to consider. As you travel across the campaign map, you'll come across unique landmarks and points of interest that'll either power your economy or provide you with additional units or with equipment for your heroes. Finding the right tools for the job is essential, and liberating, conquering, and building up the towns littered around the map will help sustain said tools, supplying you with more resources and units for you to use in battle. The variety here is just phenomenal. Between the playable factions and the non-playable enemy units alike, there's so many interesting abilities and synergies to consider. It's just a wonderful time. I can definitely recommend checking this one out on sale, and the recent DLC adds a Viking-themed faction that you might want to pick up at the same time too, but the base game has plenty to start with. I can always highly and easily recommend Songs of Conquest. Regiments is currently 30% off, available for just about $20, and if you're a fan of the War Game and Steel Division series from Eugen, but need something that's a little less micro-intensive but just as immersive and deep, this is definitely the game for you. Featuring a Cold War gone hot setting with units from countries on both sides of the expansive conflict, Regiments gives you the option to play individual skirmishes or longer scenario campaigns that string multiple battles together to tell the story of this war, but it is all limited to single player only. If you have no interest in learning a complex metagame to win online matches, this is definitely a selling point, but I wanted to make sure I was clear that Regiments doesn't feature multiplayer, with a capable AI being the source of challenge instead. There are a few major differentiators here. Units in Regiments are platoon-sized, and they can be retreated off the map to replenish their health and ammo, brought back to the fight shortly after. Rather than the deck-building approach of the comparative titles, here you'll mix and match battle groups, but the idea of bringing in reinforcements by spending points remains the same, and so too do a lot of the controls and reasons for using them. Driving on roads to move more quickly from town to town across these massive battlefields is essential. Reversing away from enemies to avoid exposing more weakly armored parts of vehicles is absolutely crucial, and you'll be bringing in off-map artillery support using line-of-sight tools to manage firing ranges and, well, lines of sight, and otherwise you'll be ensuring that your combined arms are working nicely in combination with each other. There's all kinds of stats to take into consideration across the over 60 different units as you duke it out across these massive battlefields featuring cities, forests, and open fields for all your usual modern warfare moments. Regiments is great fun, guaranteed to keep RTS fans busy, and I highly recommend picking it up on sale. DUNE Spice Wars is currently 50% off, available for just about $17, and you'll have heard me recommend this real-time 4X game set in the DUNE universe a few times already if you follow this channel, but given that the devs have just released a massive update a handful of weeks ago, introducing a ton of improvements to the base game, I wanted to give it another shout. It's worth noting that prior knowledge of the DUNE universe is not necessary in order to have a good time here, so set aside any of those concerns and focus instead on the beautiful asymmetric gameplay across a multitude of extremely colorful factions as they war for control over the desert planet of Arrakis, also known as DUNE. You can engage in individual skirmishes against the AI or in multiplayer with up to 4 players, or you can play in the game's Conquest mode, stringing a series of such skirmishes together into a playthrough featuring a meta layer for a grander scale experience. This was added after the game launched, so you might not realize that this was there if you skipped on it back then. Either way, it's a wonderful game mode. You'll typically, when battling it out, have a single city from which to expand, capturing neighboring regions by crushing the local populace, exploiting their territory to gain access to a variety of resources with which to grow your strength and capabilities, recruiting units and building structures while upgrading your capital, and going toe-to-toe with your opponents, building alliances and luring unsuspecting foes into the maw of the giant sandworm that DUNE is famous for. But that's not all you'll be doing. There are many added layers here beyond typical RTS mechanics. There's a fairly involved tech tree, diplomacy can get quite complex, and from time to time, you'll vote on policies that will dole out buffs and debuffs in exchange for influence spent during these election cycles. You'll use subterfuge and strength alike, and since each faction is so wildly different, some mechanics work in idiosyncratic ways, forcing you to adapt and modify your strategies. Within each faction, picking and choosing from various counselors before starting a game adds even further variety, fine-tuning to your playstyle within the larger bounds of the faction you picked. The game has improved significantly since it launched, first into early access, then into 1.0, and now with major updates since. I can definitely recommend picking this up. Captain of Industry is currently 20% off, available for just about $24, and if you're a fan of complex resource management and factory automation style games, don't miss out on this one. You find yourself on an abandoned island with a small crew from your ship and a basic knowledge of how to get an industrial town established. Starting with a small town built out of shipping containers, you'll need to establish the ability to farm, in the interest of keeping your people fed, before setting out to start logging, mining, and processing raw materials into all manner of end products, from sausages to uranium rods. There's a massive number of production chains to master as you make your way through a massive tech tree, building logistics systems with the help of a multitude of manually controlled and automated approaches, ranging from vehicles to conveyor belts and pipes, and then exploring a vast, terraformable island full of opportunity. I love the level of detail the game has on offer, from managing soil fertility to keeping an eye on air and water pollution, all the way to planning out how and where you excavate and dump soil in order to modify the terrain around you, reclaiming land or building dirt ramps to gain access to previously inaccessible parts of the island. Seeing the world transform around you as you excavate it is really something special, as I don't often see games represent just how devastating or perhaps impressive a pit mine can be. Import and export goods as needed, fend off pirates, build alliances, and push yourself into the final frontier of space. There is a lot to do in Captain of Industry, and the upcoming Update 3 is going to add so much more, especially if you're a fan of trains. Captain of Industry is a massive game, well worth full price, so on sale, I can easily recommend it without any hesitation. Porekeeper is currently 25% off, available for just $15, and it only just released into 1.0 after 2 years in early access spent developing a beautiful survival sandbox game that you can easily sink countless hours into alone or with up to 8 friends. I'm very picky about this genre, but Porekeeper is definitely one of the gems of 2024, sending you to dig around in the darkness of a freshly procedurally generated map, asking you to gather resources from across a few different biomes while fighting off the local flora and fauna, all to build up your base and progress through a series of challenges that help the narrative unfold. Starting with wooden gear, including wooden armor and resource acquisition implements, you'll work your way to more interesting and capable materials, establishing the production chains between them to keep the fires of industry alive. Smelt copper and iron, blow glass, and shape tin as you build more advanced equipment, furniture, and decorative items. Whether you want electricity coursing through your base, or aquariums and terrariums for eclectic fish and animals, or just a nice table on which to have breakfast, there's a lot of options to explore to your heart's content. As you go around running, mining, and fighting, you'll level up to gain more proficiency in various abilities, unlocking additional relevant skills as you get further down each individual skill tree, and Gaining experience by partaking in a relevant activity has always been my favorite kind of leveling up, so it's nice to see it implemented here too. Corekeeper was one of the rare instances where I enjoyed both aimlessly wandering about and simply doing things for the sake of doing them, and also pursuing active goals in equal measure. I can certainly recommend this one, especially to play with friends who might like different parts of the game on offer. It's much more complex than first meets the eye, and whether you're a fisher, a farmer, a miner, or a warrior, there is plenty to do. Last Train Home is currently 50% off, available for just $20, and it was a pleasant surprise last year when it came out, blending real-time tactics with base building, except the base is a train traversing through wartime Russia just after World War I as you struggle to get to its eastern coast to catch a ship back to Central Europe where your soldiers' newly established home country sits. This titular Last Train Home serves as your mobile HQ, requiring the management and training of engineers to keep it running, alongside medical staff to keep your soldiers in fighting form, all as you travel through an unforgiving landscape, occasionally sending out parties to seek out a variety of resources, ranging from food to fuel and more, sometimes engaging with world events in the towns you pass through, each with multiple possible outcomes and points of interest along the way as well that'll offer the aforementioned real-time tactical missions where you'll pick out your squad based on character classes, levels, and traits, and then play like a classic RTS just without the base building, but with the inclusion of special abilities and light stealth elements, kind of like commandos from back in the day. You'll manage morale and health to keep troops fighting, you'll level soldiers and workers up over time, you'll pick out destinations for your train and troops alike, more than you'd expect despite being literally on rails, and you'll follow a story in a setting that never really gets much attention. Last Train Home is a unique experience for a multitude of reasons, and well worth its current price tag. Battle Brothers is currently 50% off, available for just $15, and this is a game you'll have heard me recommend repeatedly, and I never intend on stopping. This is a genre-defining game, putting you in charge of a band of mercenaries in a medieval fantasy setting, asking you to choose an origin story for your band, and then fight tooth and nail in the pursuit of glory in an unforgiving, procedurally generated world. You traverse it in real time, hopping from city to city to seek out quests from different factions, hiring new recruits, and buying new equipment with what money you can scrounge together, negotiating better pay where you can, and then diving into turn-based tactical battles against all kinds of enemies, from bandits to orcs to skeletons to things of nightmare that can literally eat you in one fell swoop. The battle mechanics in Battle Brothers demand an extra layer of thought as you figure out what tools to use for what task, bringing out the dagger so you can cut down an enemy without damaging their armor, leaving it unharmed so you can loot it and use it way before you'd ever be able to afford it. Or maybe you'll sell it for good money without the need to repair it. Otherwise, you might swap all your slashing weapons out for bludgeoning ones when dueling skeletons who famously don't have any flesh to slash. Or, my personal favorite, battling in the nude to gain a higher initiative as you take on a specific enemy that I won't name that always ignores armor anyway. Overcoming these unique, often overwhelming challenges is its own reward, mixed in with the interesting backstories, a plethora of impactful status effects, an injury system that actually makes you mourn not just losses, but broken limbs and gashes all the same. Level up your brothers, spec them for specific purposes, grow your capabilities until your inevitable demise, and then try over and over and over again. Battle Brothers is worth full price to this day, and every DLC is worth a buy too if you ask me. So on sale, it's the easiest game for me to recommend. Before we move on to my next few recommendations, I'd like to remind you that outside of the channel, I am affiliated with Hooded Horse, the publisher of the next few games I'm about to mention. This affiliation is not a sponsorship, and I do not get paid to talk about or recommend their games on the channel, and it only exists because I really like the games that Hooded Horse publishes in the first place, so it only makes sense that I'd recommend their games from time to time. I always like mentioning this affiliation exists in the interest of transparency, and for more details, check out the video linked in the description below. With that said, Workers and Resources Soviet Republic is currently 50% off, available for just $20, and I've played countless hours of this game since it first released into early access many years ago, so I can easily and wholeheartedly recommend this to anybody who wants a complex city builder with a mind-blowing level of detail, an overwhelming amount of choice, and a degree of control that no other city builder offers, all on maps that are so large that the game is better referred to as a nation builder rather than a city builder in some ways. Set during the 60s onwards, you play as an impoverished Soviet republic looking to make its mark in the world, able to trade with NATO and Soviet nations alike to help establish itself as it tries to become self-sufficient. Non-alignment is working beautifully here. You can tweak and customize the level of difficulty and control to a great degree, but let me give you an example of what it's like in realistic difficulty, where the game truly shines. Let's say you want to build an apartment complex. Well, first you need to designate a construction office and purchase construction vehicles like excavators and bulldozers, but also a few trucks to ship construction material over. You can't build a house without construction material, right? But you likely won't have any of this construction material to start with, so you'll send these trucks to the border to import everything from steel to gravel to concrete and more, and then you'll drive those materials to the construction site, and unless you already have a working population, you'll need to send a bus to bring foreign workers in to actually do the work itself. These construction materials don't just assemble themselves. Eventually, you'll not want to import these construction materials, so you'll seek out raw materials and establish the processing for them too. Iron mines will bring out iron ore from a good deposit, but that ore needs to be refined into iron, and that iron needs to be refined into steel, which can then be used to build factories, electrical poles, sewage pipes, train tracks, houses, and even other vehicles, like the construction vehicles you were using right at the beginning. And that's just steel. There's also gravel, asphalt, bauxite, aluminium, oil, and much, much more, all used to manufacture a great variety of things, from housing to industry to infrastructure to food, clothes, alcohol, all the way to, again, vehicles of all kinds, planes, trains, automobiles, helicopters, trams. You can manufacture all of this locally, setting up massive industrial complexes and the infrastructure needed to move the raw, processed, and finished goods around as needed. I could go on about this game for a very long time, talking about how you need to acquire coal to work your heating plants to keep your citizens warm in the winter, or how you need to use gravity to help move sewage properly, or how if you want to pump water uphill, you need to actually build water pumps. There is so much that makes this game the best city builder I've ever played, and I recommend it at full price all the time. So at this deep discount, you should definitely grab it now, with the latest DLC being cheap and worthwhile additions to the base game at the same time. Workers and Resources Soviet Republic is hands down my favorite city builder. Nebulous Fleet Command is currently 50% off, available for just $15, and it just announced a huge update that'll be releasing in January of 2025. So now is a great time to go ahead and pick it up if you don't already own this fantastic game that provides the most believable representation of space combat. If you're a fan of the space battles in The Expanse in particular, this is a must-buy. It's received multiple significant updates since it launched into early access, and the devs show no sign of slowing down. With two distinct factions featuring different ship hulls and doctrines as a basis for their design, you can play in single-player skirmishes against the AI, with plans for a more involved single-player mode in the works, and in multiplayer, with an active and friendly community in the developer's Discord. There are mods that create custom narrative single-player experiences too, with exception to the rule being a particularly noteworthy one. There's also an alternate branch of the game you can boot up to dive into and take a look at the game's experimental Conquest mode in its alpha state, an alternate single-player mode that, even in its incomplete state, is a ton of fun to play. While the dev has bigger single-player plans still in the works, between skirmishes against the AI, mods, and the alpha of Conquest mode, there's a lot to enjoy solo already, and as I mentioned, the community is quite large and extremely friendly. So if you want to play multiplayer, it's actually quite inviting to do so. The game is certainly among the more complex offerings when it comes to sci-fi space games, featuring combat with 6 degrees of freedom, electronic warfare, damage control teams, proper implementations of recon equipment, and considerations of momentum and inertia. Fleet customization involves using a point-buy system to select between multiple different chassis and kitting them out with different equipment, including considerations for power supply and command center placement, radar and electronic warfare tools, weapons of different kinds, even allowing you to customize the missiles carried in any missile bays to behave in specific ways. From target acquisition to fuel to damage output, It's an insane level of detail. And when you're actually fighting, that level of detail persists. You'll turn radio and comms off and on to share targeting data between your ships, or to make your ships less likely to be picked up by enemy radar when you turn all these systems off. You'll maneuver and adjust facing to try and protect ship components from enemy fire, presenting point defense systems to incoming missiles when possible, reacting to evolving situations constantly, and hoping your ships have been well designed across the entire fleet to work in beautiful unison against whatever it is the enemy is fielding for that particular engagement. The level of detail and desire for realistic representation in this game is astounding, and I don't think I've ever played a space combat game quite like it. I highly recommend checking it out, especially if you like the challenge of learning a complex new game that's not just complicated for the sake of being complicated. Against the Storm is currently 50% off, available for just $15, and remains one of the most unique city building experiences I've had in recent years, thanks to how it blends with roguelite elements. Set in a dark fantasy universe where an endless storm wipes out all but one city on a regular basis, you play as Viceroy to the Scorched Queen, setting out from this central citadel to establish multiple cities and seek out ways to push back against the storm. A hex-based map lays out multiple tiles featuring different biomes and modifiers based on location, and selecting one lets you choose what starting resources and citizens you'll bring with you to said tile. Once there, you'll try to fulfill the Scorched Queen's orders, trying to keep her satisfied while ensuring your citizens are happy too, and that the forest around you doesn't get too upset at your exploitations. Dangers await in the glades, and stumbling across them ill-prepared can be very expensive. Each type of citizen, be they lizards or beavers or humans, foxes or otherwise, specialize in different kinds of work, and assigning tasks accordingly is as important as fulfilling each species' specific needs. With progress comes the ability to unlock new buildings that then become persistently available for future use right from the start of a new settlement. Once enough objectives have been met at an established settlement, you can then select a new tile from the hex-based overworld to push onto as you continue seeking out these resources needed to fight the storm, buying persistent upgrades to help you along. Eventually, the storm rages and wipes out all of your settlements across the hex-based map, leaving only the aforementioned central citadel standing, kicking off a new cycle. Depending on your progress, it's possible you've bought yourself more time in the next cycle, and the next, and the next. It's a great genre blend that allows you to play the initial challenge of a new city over and over again, moving on when things start to settle down. It's an immensely challenging and fulfilling game with some very clever ideas, and it's constantly getting some excellent updates. I can highly recommend grabbing it. There you have it, folks, a selection of excellent games that are well worth their current price tags. If you found something you liked, consider hitting the like button and maybe even sharing the video with your friends. If you have recommendations of your own, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments below, but otherwise, as always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. That'll keep us alive and running smoothly, and of course, a big old thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.